First thing I want to do is apologize to the public for this building not being opened. I was very surprised when I came to the front doors and they were still locked. I'm told that this is an executive branch decision, and I have been in contact with them and in contact with our leadership to try to encourage our building to be back open. I'm told right now that it's going to be July 1st, so hopefully that will happen. We have some new members on the committee I want to welcome. We have Vice Chair Jason Howe. Jason, are you with us remotely? He's here. Oh, there you are. Okay, Jason. He's going to serve as Vice Chair, and it's great to have him here. He did an able job during the session. Senator Gerald Neal, Representative Patrick Flannery, Representative Reginald Meeks, and Representative Killian Timoney. Welcome to all the members. I think you're going to enjoy serving on this committee. I would like to remind those members that are remotely to, when you answer roll call, please tell us whether you are where you're at. Also, please mute your microphones at home, and if you're unless you want to be recognized. Do we have a quorum? Madam Secretary, call the roll.
Senator Adams. Senator Buford.
I am present by remote only.
Thank you. Senator Higdon. Senator Hornback. Senator Howell.
Here in the room.
Senator McDaniel. Senator Neal. Senator Nemus.
Present in the room.
Senator Thayer.
Here in the room.
Senator Thomas. Representative Banta.
Here in the room.
Representative Bratcher.
Present in Jefferson County.
Thank you. Representative Birch. Representative Flannery.
Present remotely.
Thank you. Representative Gentry.
Here in the room.
Representative Huff.
Present remotely.
Thank you. Representative Cook.
Here in the room.
Representative Massey.
Here in the room.
Representative McCoy.
Here.
Representative Meeks. Representative Meredith. Representative Miller. Representative Moser. Representative Palumbo. Representative Pratt.
Here in the room.
Representative Santoro.
Here.
Representative Timoney.
Here.
Representative Westrom.
Present from the 79th.
Okay, thank you. Representative Koenig.
Here in the room.
Chairman Schickel.
Present in the room.
May I indicate that Senator Neal is here and in the district?
I've got it noted. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. We do have a quorum and are constituted to do business. I do believe we do not have any minutes to approve, so we can move on with the agenda. The interim is a very important time of year for this committee because we pride ourselves in this committee of airing legislation before it is heard during the regular session, so it can get the proper input from the citizens and the legislators and the professions that it affects. And the first bill that we have on the agenda today, Senate Bill 195, is one of those bills. I want to thank the bill sponsor, Senator Karen Byrd, for her patience with this bill. We've discussed it a lot during the session, and she has agreed to have this interim hearing today to hear this important piece of legislation. Senator, it's great to see you again. Introduce yourself for the record. Proceed with your testimony. You may also introduce your guests.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman Schickel, and thank you, Chairman Koenig, for hearing this bill.
This bill basically allows inmates who were trained and received a limited certification as a first responder or an emergency medical technician, EMT, while incarcerated to apply to the EMS board to continue to be certified once released from prison. As Senator Schickel alluded, I did file this bill in the 2021 session, but it was late in a very short session. There was no opportunity for the committee to hear it, and I really appreciate you taking your time to listen to us today. The global pandemic highlighted the importance and demand for skilled healthcare workers, and this is particularly prevalent in hospitals, correctional facilities, where we witnessed a significant spike in COVID cases. And I think a program such as this would really greatly benefit our Kentucky communities and local healthcare organizations. Mr. John Mark Hutchinson, who MSN, is a constituent and a nurse in the emergency room down at Norton Hospital downtown. He is the one that brought this to my attention. When he explained the problem to me, I completely understood. And I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Hutchinson to give you all just a little bit of background of what we're talking about. Thank you.
Welcome, Mr. Hutchison. Please introduce yourself for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here today. My name's John Mark Hutchison. I'm a nurse downtown in the ER. A couple years ago, prior to the COVID pandemic, any run from a Kentucky State reformatory system will be done by these the limited EMT inmates. They do all the runs. I'd receive a report from different EMTs in these scenarios, and there were some that are just amazing. All of them very professional, very good. As in any profession, you can have the spectrum of really good and not so good, even in politics, I'm sure. When I spoke to Joey Johnson about, hey, what happens when you get out? I think Norton could do some sort of bridge program to help men or women when they get out of prison. Let's merge and do some sort of job. And that's when I found out something that shocked me, like, oh, well, it's a limited EMT license, and it says felon on the license, and when they're released from jail to the community, where they'll need employment and they'll need residency, place to live, that license is revoked because of their felony status, which was shocking to me as one who received report and saw the work and saw the professional character from these men, from these women. And so I started to get my wheels turning. Well, if we're going to get people employed when they're out, when they're released from prison, how can we do that? At this point in our nation's history, I don't think I could impress upon you more how important this is to be on the right side of history so that we are removing hurdles and obstacles from individuals that have been sentenced in the court for wrongdoing. That sentencing does not entail massive ramifications, and they go to jail and they serve their time, and we say they have been rehabilitated. We say we do respect you enough as a person that we're going to allow you to take this training, and you're going to pass this training. You're going to do the same work that all these other EMTs do. But you've messed up too much. And we know you have to get a job, but you can't have this job. And there are so many scenarios that we can think about, we can brainstorm about, and we can go, well, this scenario and this scenario and this scenario, I don't want that person working on me. How do we do character evaluations on every medical professional? No, we don't. How bold is it, dare I say arrogant of us, to put that on someone? You're a felon. You cannot serve in this. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that sentence was complete and they've been released from jail. I want to implore you that if our correctional institutions are tasked with the responsibility to see these people carry out their sentencing, be rehabilitated, be released, but then say, well, we're not going to fully allow you to return to society. As far as the world's concerned, America's very far behind in the way that we treat those who have been incarcerated. The National Registry does recognize EMTs in other states. Kentucky is behind in catching up with what our communities need. As Kentuckians, it is vitally important for us to remove hurdles and obstacles.
Thank you, Mr. Hutchinson.
Thank you for letting me speak, sir.
You're very welcome. And I am going to have some comments about your comments because you asked to be corrected if you're wrong, and I think you are wrong on a couple things.
Yes, sir.
But before I do that, I'm going to, does the other gentleman want to have any testimony?
Yes, I would like to introduce Mr. Chuck O'Neill. Mr. Chuck O'Neill is the Associate Director.
I'm the Deputy Director for the Kentucky Board of EMS over administration. And thank you.
He has comments that I'd like everybody to hear, even though they may not necessarily agree with the way I see this. Thank you.
And thank you.
You're welcome. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you, sir. I do have a few prepared comments. I'll try to make it brief.
Sure. The only thing I would ask is do not state anything that's already been testified to. Thank you.
Yes, sir. I thank Senator Berg for inviting me to speak today on this bill. And I believe that the intent of the bill to put incarcerated felons to work upon release is noble. And I believe that more bills should be dedicated to work-related programs to incarcerated individuals. That being said, I'm here today to speak in opposition to this bill. First and foremost, I do believe in rehabilitation, and I believe in technical programs that will enhance an inmate's ability to find work and be a valuable contributor to society upon their release. But emergency medical services, health care, law enforcement, and work in schools are not those technical programs. The Kentucky Board of Emergency Medical Services, as well as our colleagues at the Kentucky Board of Medical Licensure and the Kentucky Board of Nursing, are charged with ensuring that the safety of the citizens of the Commonwealth. As a regulatory body, it is our responsibility as delegated by the General Assembly to vet applicants for certification licensure and to provide adequate background checks of applicants to ensure that patients, their families, and their property is safe during an emergency. Emergency medical services is a multidisciplinary profession that is part public safety and part health care. Our colleagues in law enforcement do not allow convicted felons to become peace officers, and our colleagues in healthcare do not allow physicians, physician assistants, nurse practitioners, or nurses to be felons either. Why is that? It's about protecting the public and ensuring public trust in the state and the state entities that vet applicants. Another consideration is that many of the individuals have convictions related to manufacturing and distributing or abusing controlled substances. Controlled substances are accessible on nearly every advanced life support ambulance in Kentucky and in every hospital in Kentucky. The risk of controlled substance diversion is not worth the benefit. Another consideration on this matter is also something called the OIG exclusion list, the Office of the Inspector General exclusion list. You can be placed on the federal OIG exclusion list for illegally manufacturing controlled substances. If you have been found guilty of manufacturing a controlled substance, you will be placed on the OIG exclusion list. What this means is that the individual cannot work for any entity that participates in a federally funded health program. These programs include VA, Medicare, and Medicaid, and nearly every hospital and ambulance service in Kentucky participates in these government reimbursement programs and would not be able to employ these individuals even if it was their wish to. Patients that are experiencing an emergency should not have to worry about the criminal past of those that are in their home alone with them at 3 a.m. They should not have to worry about their personal belongings being taken while EMS professionals are in their home. They should not have to worry about their prescriptions being taken from their home or property while they're seeking care. They should not have to worry about being physically or sexually assaulted while under an individual's care. Citizens of the Commonwealth place their trust in the General Assembly to protect their health and welfare, and the General Assembly delegates that duty to our organization as it relates to EMS. I ask that you help us to continue to protect the health and safety of Kentuckians.
Thank you for your testimony. And I want to get back to a couple of Mr. Hutchison's comments. Mr. O'Neill, you did a great job at testifying, and I share almost all of your concerns. Mr. Hutchison, your testimony, the tone of it is that somehow there's some sort of intentional oppression or discrimination, and I just think that is way, way, way off the mark. Senator Byrd's bill, which she's worked on hard, and I do actually think there are some things that we can do to help with that bill, the spirit of the bill. But as a former first responder, former EMT, I've been in those homes at 3 in the morning when you rush into a bedroom, someone's in full cardiac arrest, and there is no thought to given to any of the property, drugs, or jewelry that are there. It's simply trying to save that person's life. And at that time, when a citizen is most vulnerable, just to have a blanket statement where we're just going to let people who maybe have convicted of drug offenses, theft, and things of this nature, and say, "Oh, we're just going to turn you loose in someone's house," I think is not prudent. Is not respecting the public, and I just resent a little bit the tone that somehow that these regulations are somehow intentionally discriminatory or intentionally oppressing people. I know it's very fashionable these days to take that tone, but I just really disagree with it, and I just wanted to say that. We do have some people that have some questions. Representative,
May I just say, please forgive me for my tone there, and I do not imply that to you or anyone here. So I hear
your
that.
apologies accepted. Thank you. Representative McCoy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. 2 quick questions that I'll ask is one, and I don't care who answers them, just to clarify. The initial EMT license that's given to the prisoner, is that done to the exact same standards as it is every other EMT? And second question, is it your intention under this bill that if they apply, they are automatically going to continue, or would they just be sort of applying like a new person would? Thank you.
Yes, Representative McCoy, I'll address your first question, and Senator Burke will address the second part. The provisions of training are not the same, actually. For those felons are certified with a Department of Corrections EMT certification that's authorized under KRS 311A.200. And the reason for that is because our national board exam, physicians take board examinations called the USMLE. They're standardized national examinations. Nurses take an examination called the NCLEX. EMTs and paramedics take an examination called the National Registry examination. And felons are not eligible for certification or testing through the National Registry of EMTs. So through the provisions of KRS 311A.200, we do have the ability to, the facility has the ability to train the individuals that are incarcerated, and they do take an examination similar to the National Registry, but it is not actually the National Registry exam. It's what we call an assessment examination that's similar to the National Registry, but it is not. They do not complete a program and become nationally registered because they're not eligible.
And, sir, if I may address some of those questions.
Please go through the chair, Senator.
Oh, sir, thank you. I'm sorry. The National Registry of Emergency Technicians says that you can deny somebody a seat at their board if they have a felony conviction. It lays out what reasons you may want to use for that. It is an option. It is not an absolute. Basically, all we are asking with this bill is if we have incarcerated prisoners here in the state of Kentucky that we choose and they agree to take the training and sit for the exam that we use here in the state, and we are using these people as EMTs during their incarceration, we are only asking that upon release, they have a chance to sit in front of the board and ask, can I keep this license? Now, let me tell you, I'm a healthcare provider. I have been for many, many years. There is a law. There are rules that if I have my MD and I commit a felony, I can lose my license. This is not what we're talking about. We're talking about people who committed felonies, then got their license. We're asking that they be allowed the chance to keep it. And there are healthcare providers all over this state who are under supervision from their board. And I can promise you that, either for drug-related offenses, for personal offenses. I know colleagues, I know family members. This is done routinely. You don't automatically lose your license because you committed a crime. There are other options for most other healthcare providers in this state.
Thank you, Senator. Chairman Koenig.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Some of my questions were asked and answered. And one question I have that is doesn't necessarily indicate support or opposition to this is if it's good for those that learn to be an EMT during their time in incarceration, why not ones that were qualified and were acting as EMTs and then went into prison and then were coming out? Why the difference?
Most medical boards have a way for you to appeal to your board and either go under supervision. Depending on the nature of the crime, you have an option to be able to keep that license. Certain crimes, obviously, you wouldn't.
Sure.
But most of these drug-related offenses, you would.
So there's flexibility now
For other
current,
healthcare professionals.
for people that went in, and you're just looking to extend that to those who have been,
I'm just saying,
who have learned the skill while incarcerated.
I'm saying we've hand-selected these individuals. They have done the work. They have done the training. This is not insignificant training. They have done the training. They have acted as EMTs during their incarceration. I am asking as a state that we give them the opportunity to sit in front of their board, have their history reviewed, and let their board make a decision as to whether or not they can supervise them appropriately. Remember, EMTs never work alone. And I can speak to Chairman Schickel, when you are in a situation like that, where it's life and death, and all hands are on board, and this is your training, this is what you are trained to do, this is what you have chosen to do as a profession, your attention is on your patient and getting your patient out of that home or out of that environment alive, in your ambulance alive, and to your hospital alive.
Thank you, Senator. You speak to the issue very well, and I appreciate your point of view, and I'm going to work with you on it. I do think there's room for flexibility and individual attention to this. I do think it's so important to point out that when you have an EMT in an institutional setting, there's a great reason for that, is they are providing needed care to those inmates in that jail or prison, and that saves taxpayer money. Right. They can get there quicker. They're right there for that. That does not automatically mean, the key phrase, automatically mean that they need to be certified on the outside. But I do agree with you, and I'm open to that discussion, and I appreciate your passion for the issue, because we all want as many people working as possible, and we all want as good medical care as possible, but we also have to protect people who are very vulnerable, and I think we all agree on that, so we'll all work on that together.
And, sir, if I may, I'd like to add, I am unaware of any other certification that you can receive in this state while you are incarcerated that you are not allowed to keep upon your release.
And that will be the last word. Thank you for your testimony. We don't have any other questions from the committee. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is House Bill 224, Representative Kim Banta. Representative, welcome. This is another one of those bills, although this bill I don't really think is at all controversial. I don't know anyone that's against it. Maybe there is. That's the reason why we have these meetings. Hopefully, if there is anyone against it, they'll let us know right now. But welcome, and proceed with your testimony.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your time. This bill passed 85-1 in 2020, and then it died the COVID death. This is a CPA bill, and it simply has three main things that it wants. It wants to allow the state board to award scholarships using their own money, so it's no cost to the state. And it's so that the CPA can track their accounting major, recruit, preclude shortages, things like that. The board would like to be granted immunity from lawsuits for state board members, and as long as they are acting in good faith in the performance of normal duties. It's the same for medical licensure, nursing, pharmacy, board of dentistry. There's nothing crazy about that at all. And if adopted, the important thing to them is that they would no longer have to purchase their own insurance. So that helps them out a little bit. And finally, probably what I think is the key to this is it would eliminate the requirement that out-of-state CPAs seeking a Kentucky license via reciprocity must have obtained the 1 year of accounting or a test experience within 5 years of successfully passing the CPA exam in their home state. This 5-year was not intended to affect those seeking a Kentucky license via reciprocity, and they believe that if a CPA has current and valid license in their current state, they should be able to get a Kentucky license via reciprocity. The way it is now, it puts an unintended burden on CPAs attempting to locate in Kentucky, and there is a CPA shortage. And that's all I have.
Yeah, and thank you, and I look forward to getting this through the Senate next session. If you get it down to us a little earlier, that would be helpful. But I think it's a good piece of legislation. I support it. Thank you for your testimony
Thank you,
today.
sir.
Are there any questions? Thank you. Representative Wheatley, are you with us remotely? Oh, you're here. I'm sorry. Let's take you next, and your people with you. Don't have my distance glasses on, so I didn't see you back there. We have House Bill 346. We're going to item number 5 on the agenda. Representative Wheatley is here, the bill sponsor. Welcome to this committee. Interesting legislation here, which I've talked to several people about. Introduce yourself for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to Co-Chair Koenig for listening to this bill. This is a House bill that was filed last session. And as a former member of this esteemed committee, and I congratulate the new members, you're on a very interesting committee, and you deal with interesting topics everywhere from alcohol, horse racing, to cremation, as our topic is today. So House Bill 346 is a concept that was brought to me. I know very little bit about it because it's a complicated or a sophisticated cremation technique that is become more available, is now, as you see, and there is a handout, I believe, is going to be handed out related to different states that have adopted alkaline hydrolysis as a form of cremation. And we are, I believe, at 20 states and several other provinces in Canada that adopted this. I have with me today the constituent who brought this concept to me, an entrepreneurial sir that has also gotten into this topic with a nationally recognized producer, I believe, of the container that is necessary for the alkaline hydrolysis. And I'm, without further ado, going to turn it over to constituent Anthony or Tony Knoll. Go ahead.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, and thank you, Senator Schickel, Representative Koenig, and the committee members for this opportunity. My interest in alkaline hydrolysis was prompted as I planned my own final wishes. Generally familiar with the financial and environmental cost of flame cremation and traditional burial, I investigated flameless cremation or alkaline hydrolysis. Having an interest to make the option available, I discovered that the Commonwealth had no statutes that defined the practice. I consulted with the regulators, local funeral home operators, and then contacted Representative Wheatley to pursue statutory changes that would make a financial investment in the technology appropriate or possible. Our goal is to capitalize and operate facilities that will supply this growing option in an industry that one day will serve each of us. Our intent is to pursue this by the combining of financial resources, enabling local funeral homes to be owners of a facility that they can patronize, a sort of a co-op idea, if you will. By the statutory changes we are seeking, Kentucky operators will be in a position to provide this service to bordering areas that have not taken a proactive stance to legislate this opportunity. In other words, what I'm saying there is alluding back to what Representative Wheatley said earlier. There are 20 states in the United States that have adopted regulations.
And I don't mean to interrupt you, but members, you have in your packet a map of the states
Correct.
that have adopted it.
So that's what this handout is about. You can see the states in green are the states that have accepted or imposed regulatory and statutory changes. As you look at Kentucky, you can see that Indiana and Ohio, currently West Virginia, Virginia, and Tennessee, none of the surrounding states have regulatory or statutory changes adopted yet. If Kentucky were to adopt these changes and the technology was commercialized, it would enable funeral home operators and service providers within the geographic areas of those states to offer the services. It's just it's a tremendous commercial opportunity. It's an option that's available in the funeral home industry that is growing exponentially in the states that it's been adopted in, as is flame cremation. We have Sam ready to go, I think.
Okay, thank you, Tony, and Mr. Chair, if you'll indulge, we do have, within your package, you should see information about the alkaline hydrolysis from an expert, and this expert is remote, and if she is ready, Samantha Seiber, I believe, if I don't mispronounce her name, is available and ready to go.
About how long is the presentation?
I believe it's 7 to 8 minutes. But
Perfect.
We'll move forward.
Okay, welcome.
Hi, everyone can hear me okay?
Yeah, please introduce yourself for the record. It's good to see you. We see you on the screen. We hear you loud and clear, and proceed with your testimony.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, and thank you to the committee members for your time today. My name is Samantha Seiber. I don't even know how to pronounce my last name. I'm a biologist by degree. My family's Indiana company has manufactured this equipment for 30 years. And over the past 16, I've helped over 40 states and many other places around the world draft language to make this option available to families. I've reviewed the language of this bill in detail, and it's well written. It's in line with what I would have recommended be done in the state of Kentucky based on how law is currently written for this sector. So I'm testifying in support of this bill. In my experience, legislative change is necessary, and I'll explain why. But just to kind of rest the nerves on this newer option, the states that have approved alkaline hydrolysis have not had issues with licensing. They've not had any financial burden. Licensing is nearly identical to crematories. It's a couple extra check boxes on the form. Inspections are pretty much identical and performed by the same folks that inspect crematories. So there's really not a burden put on the regulatory board for allowing this. It's business as usual, what they're already doing with licensing professionals and crematories already. In order to start some good discussions, I just want to give a bird's eye view of this topic because I I'm sure there's people that have no idea what alkaline hydrolysis is. It's an alternative to burial and cremation that achieves the same end result as flame cremation, which is the reduction of the body to final ash remains. It does so using 90% less energy without burning any fossil fuels and without emitting any harmful greenhouse gases. And truly, these machines get approved for use where flame crematories would never be permitted at funeral homes, historic funeral homes that are located in downtown of an area. There's no emissions. Alkaline hydrolysis doesn't limit options for families in any way. Everything preceding and following the process remains unchanged. The body may still be embalmed if desired by the family. Most families still hold a viewing, service, or full mass. The family still receives ashes. Most people don't really know that while flame cremation ash does contain some of what we think of as ash from a fireplace, that's just from the casket or clothing. The remains after cremation primarily resemble bone, and these bone minerals are processed into unrecognizable fragments and placed into an urn for the family. This is the same with alkaline hydrolysis. Same piece of equipment is used to do that. The only difference is that the ash is more of a powder, and there's about 20 to 30% more because the process is more gentle to those minerals in the process. Sometimes people mention, and this is relevant to the bill, that the final remains shouldn't be called ash. Research shows that families call it ash, and they're actually right. By scientific definition, ash is the inorganic mineral that remains after all organic material has been broken down. It's defined this way in every biochemistry textbook that exists. Thus, the minerals that remain from flame cremation and alkaline hydrolysis, and actually burial after many, many years of the body decomposing, these minerals that are left are all ash. And of course, anything that can be done with ashes from flame cremation can also be done with ashes from this process. The urn can be buried at the family plot in the cemetery, placed in a columbarium. The ashes can be scattered or made into a jewelry piece. I won't go any further into all the wild things that people can do these days, but there's a lot of options. The process takes place in a state-of-the-art stainless steel system that's powered only by electricity. And I think that's what I really want you to hear today. It's powered only by electricity. So it has a place, it's not going anywhere. And as we improve sustainable resources, sustainable sources of electricity, this just becomes greener. The technical way the process works is that it very gently circulates a heated solution of 95% water and 5% alkali, which is the chemical opposite of an acid. The flow of the water is similar to what you'd see in a creek or stream. And then nearly identical to flame cremation, all that the operator sees at the end of the process are just the final bone remains, which are pure calcium phosphate, along with any medical implants. And just like with flame, the final bone remains are processed into powder, and placed in an urn, and the medical implants can be recycled. The implants are a little bit of an interesting thing with both cremation and alkaline hydrolysis. From this process, they're in remarkable condition. They're clean. And it's one of the greatest environmental benefits of this option, and for flame cremation as well, because getting titanium to the point where it can be used for a medical implant comes at a huge environmental cost. And people are getting more implants and at younger ages. Instead of being buried in the ground forever, the precious metals stay in the loop for future use. In the scientific field, we use a study called an LCA, or life cycle assessment, to determine the cradle to grave impact of a practice. And this kind of study takes into account everything that you could possibly think of, including how much water is used. What about manufacturing the chemical and transporting it on site? What about the emissions from
Samantha?
making? Yes.
I hate to interrupt you, but we do have some questions. So if you could, you've been going on now about 6 minutes. If you could conclude your testimony.
Yeah, I could do that. Let me go through to right now, Kentucky families are having to arrange transport to neighboring approved states for this option, which adds further hardship to them during an already devastating time. And that's assuming they even know it's a choice. If they don't know it's a choice, they may end up like me. My grandparents were flame cremated because my state wasn't legal. And I regret that I didn't work harder to figure out we could have gone to a neighboring state. It was 2 devastating weeks in the hospital. They should have lived another 20 years, but they passed away within a day of each other from unrelated causes. I wish I could have gotten myself together to know I could have gone to another state. And it's really not a fair time to expect people to do that. Kentucky families shouldn't have to make arrangements in Tennessee, Missouri, Illinois, or North Carolina for this option. We need to make it legal. This bill doesn't open Kentucky's funeral law. Sorry, just one second. It doesn't open Kentucky's funeral law as the Wild West. There's numerous points of regulation that will touch regulating this technology. The law has to allow it. The business has to be licensed by the board. The equipment must be compliant with state health and environmental regs. Zoning has to be approved, and the release of the processed water must be done with written permission. So what we're asking today is to move forward with item number 1, which is changing the law. Right now, it just simply doesn't allow it. And without the change, the licensing board will be in an unworkable position. They can't sidestep the technical verbiage of the law, and they won't. If they did, it opened a can of worms for setting poor precedent for future options that also need to be regulated. Without the change, Kentucky businesses can't move forward. The risk is too high, and investors and banks will not finance this equipment without evidence that it is explicitly legal. And finally, without the change, families will ultimately pay the price. Providers won't take the risk, and families won't have access to it. They also need the security of it being around long term if they're pre-planning. And so it's important to make this change. I think that pretty much wraps it up.
Thank you.
Thank
you.
you, Samantha.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for your testimony, Samantha. Senator Buford, can you hear me? Did you have a question? I'll ask it for him. He texted me here. Senator Buford asked, what's the average cost to process a body, and what does the funeral home charge? I know that's kind of a hypothetical, but does anybody on the panel have an answer for that?
Sam, I can.
Yes, Mr. Chair, if I may, this is Tom Buford. This process has been around since 1888 in England. There should be some reasonable answers for this. Mostly in England, as it was invented, it was used for the disposal of animal carcasses. So if they don't know the charge, I would certainly.
Well, they didn't say that yet. You give them a chance, Tom. I know it wouldn't be an L&O meeting unless you didn't have a difficult question. But so I did ask them that question. You texted what the average, and they're looking at it. I think they're getting ready to answer.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I can answer if it's appropriate.
Whoever on the panel would like to answer.
Go ahead.
The cost of this to consumers is very similar, if not the same, to families. Sometimes it can be $300 or $400 more to a family. Now, the cost that providers pay to a trade organization, it varies in a 10-mile difference, let alone across the United States. So usually in the U.S., I don't know, providers are paying a few $100 for a cremation. They're probably going to have to pay about $500 for this. So it's in the same ballpark. It's not it's not a financial hardship for families to afford it, and it makes business sense as well.
Thank you.
And all of my research, Senator Buford, all of my research agrees with Sam's on the cost. And then I have a range of costs from a experienced provider of this technology in Illinois. And he has told me that he charges anywhere from $795 for a very basic service up to $3,500, and that would be with the traditional embalming and viewing and such like.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Knoll. We have a question from Representative Birch and then Representative Cook. You're next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Who is opposed to this legislation, and why would they be opposed to it?
Thank you, Representative Birch. There are two organizations primarily that we would have continued contact with, and it's the Kentucky Board of Embalmers and Funeral Directors and the the Funeral Directors Association of Kentucky. We've had some contact with these groups. There have been some concerns just related to exactly what we are trying to do with the legislation. The contact has gone fairly well, and I will turn it over to Tony, at least with one other contact with somebody with the Funeral Directors Association.
I have pursued early on, when I first began investigating the technology, my first contact was with the Kentucky Board of Mortuary and Funeral Services. I don't recall the exact name of the board, but my contact there was extremely positive. And they had it on their agenda for a board meeting. When I followed up after that board meeting, they had no objections to moving to the technology. And then I contacted the Kentucky Funeral Directors Association through a board member. And it happened that the issue was subsequent to a prior conversation with Representative Wheatley. They had already scheduled it on their agenda for a board meeting. And when I called to follow up on that, the board member told me that the discussion was neutral, and that a lot of the reticence that I've encountered in my discussions has to do with the capitalization of the project, which is exactly what the legislation is meant to cure.
Thank you. Representative Cook?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is follow-up question to that, and just doing Google quick search on my phone here. New Hampshire had this legalized for several years and then actually overturned it. So it goes in with the opposition. Do you have what happened up there that they overturned that law?
No, I don't.
I'm knowledgeable on that. If it helps.
A brief explanation would be in order.
It's legal again. It was one of the earlier states to approve it. There was some disagreement. There wasn't anything wrong with the technology.
Thank you.
Yes.
I've gotten several phone calls just this morning from different funeral homes about this. So, and I explained to them that we don't know anything about it. I said, this is why we have interim hearings. I know some of the funeral homes are watching on the YouTube, and this is an interim hearing of this matter. Funeral homes, you now know about this legislation. I would encourage you to contact this panel and the bill sponsor about it. I'm sure we'll have some robust discussion. We may even have to have another meeting. I've found over the years that these type of issues can sometimes require a lot of discussion, but I sure appreciate you bringing this today. And as we all, some of us get a little older, we start thinking about these things a little bit more. And so we got some good information today. Does anyone else have a question? Any more questions? Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
The last item on the agenda is House Bill 279, an act relating to school facilities. And I believe this is something else from the last session, and I appreciate the bill sponsor's patience. Looks like you have quite a distinguished panel there. Well, welcome. Introduce yourselves for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Co-Chair, Koenig members. Good to see everyone. Josh Branscombe, State Representative.
Chuck Truesdell, Director of Government Relations for the Kentucky Department of Education. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for having us today.
Thank you. Greg Dunbar, Manager, District Facilities Branch, Kentucky Department of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. House Bill 279 is an expanded jurisdiction bill, and just to give you a brief history on this, because it probably will be familiar to many of you, this bill came through the House in the 2020 session, passed overwhelmingly before being caught up in the Senate due to COVID. Like many bills that year, died the COVID death. This past session, it came out of the House unanimously, passed 97-0, but simply we just ran out of time with the quick session. Currently, local governments are responsible for the examination and approval and disapproval of plans and specifications for construction projects up to specific sizes and types, and this is defined in statute. One building category that is currently outside of their jurisdiction is school facilities. The purpose of House Bill 279 was to allow local governments to perform plan reviews, inspections, and have jurisdiction over the enforcement responsibilities for school construction projects, where the local government and the Department of Housing and Building Construction agree in writing. So I just want to emphasize this is only when the local government and Housing and Building Construction agree in writing. And the purpose of this bill is to relieve some of the burden on housing, building, construction, and the backlog for state plan review, and allow local governments, where appropriate and with qualified personnel, to get those projects moving. Throughout the process and working on this bill, I was able to work with the Kentucky Department of Education, who had some language that, a lot of cleanup language, but also added to this bill. And Mr. Chairman, I would like to turn it over to them for comment, if that's appropriate.
That is appropriate. And I would just want to say that you are exactly right, Representative. This bill, I regret this bill not passing last session. I know it's very important, especially to high growth areas, that it be passed. And I am personally committed to the upcoming session to getting this bill passed. We just ran out of time, and I didn't think it had been vetted properly, but the more I learn about it, the more I realize how important this piece of legislation is. Proceed with your testimony.
Well, that is music to my ears, Mr. Chairman. And we really do appreciate Representative Branscombe allowing us to work with him to add some pieces that were originally filed in 2020 in House Bill 599, but that bill was filed very late in the session. And so these pieces in the House Committee Sub were first moved in this past 2021 session. I'll be honest, most of the criticism that we get from the local school districts does happen on the school facilities process. And we are looking at internal improvements we can make to streamline that process, but there are a number of things in statute that, for lack of a better term, are simply bureaucratic red tape, and we'd like the opportunity to get rid of some of those. One of those additions in the House Committee Sub is that Housing, Buildings, and Construction, as a courtesy, typically copies Kentucky Department of Education on its plan reviews, so we can help streamline that process. And the House Committee Sub merely makes sure that the local governments, when they are part of that process, do the same thing. The House Committee Sub also removes statutory language that mandates water bottle filling stations to be a part of any new school construction plan. And that is a good thing. It's well-intentioned, but that language properly belongs in the state's plumbing code, where it does now reside. And so that can be removed from statute without any change to student health or safety. And furthermore, KDE doesn't really have the expertise to do that sort of thing. And so it really just gums up the works and delays the process for school districts that, as you know, Mr. Chairman, in those high growth districts, they need to build as quickly as they possibly can. The House Committee Sub also removes an energy report that has been required in statute since 2010. That report and the efficient school design movement was jump-started by ARA funds, which obviously are no longer there. However, KDE and Energy and Environment Cabinet staff still spend about 200 plus hours each summer putting that report together. That's 5 weeks total that could be spent on assistance to districts reviewing their plans in the way that we see fit. The report was designed to help legislators come up with better legislation and better ideas for efficient school design. However, there's really no clear evidence that that has been the case recently, and I will say that when I was an LRC staffer, I would have been the person reviewing for fiscal purposes bills like that, and I don't recall any crossing my desk. In fact, though, in 2010, Warren County was the first school in the built the first school in the nation, Richardsville Elementary, to be net zero in the country. So Kentucky is making progress in this area, even without this the report sort of outliving its usefulness at this point. And finally, and this isn't a bureaucratic red tape issue, but merely a cleanup issue, the House Committee sub removed references to the Kentucky Efficient School Design Trust Fund, which for those of you who have been in the legislature a while know that the statutes are, as I say, littered with trust funds and restricted fund accounts that are there to accept funds, appropriations, gifts, what have you, but have never actually received those funds. And this would simply remove that from the statute. And that is sort of where we come to this bill. We appreciate that.
Thank you. I got a question for the bill sponsor. I'm a little confused. The House Committee sub, is that the original bill I got last year, or has there been a bunch of stuff added?
This would have been the sub. So there was a bill, and then the committee sub was added with the KDE language, and that's what was presented on the House floor.
Got it. Okay, thank you. I was hoping that was your answer. Sir, do you wish to testify? Or
Greg is simply here for questions. He is our
great.
facilities.
Let's see if we have any. Representative Meredith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Branscombe, just a real brief question for you. I know Chuck mentioned that this bill was originally filed in 2020. Who was the representative that was unsuccessful at getting that passed at that time?
Yeah, can I refuse to answer that, Mr. Chairman?
I believe he's out of order. That's what I'd have to say. Any other questions? Again, I want to thank you for being here. I'm going to roll up my sleeves and make sure this happens this session. I apologize for the delay last session, and I know these high growth issues really are yearning for this, and I'm committed to getting it done. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Anything else before we adjourn? Without objection, we stand adjourned.